It's March 1865. General Johnston is in Smithfield, North Carolina. General Sherman's army is starting to come together. At this moment in time, they're 60,000 strong. General Johnston has just over 20,000 men. They're concentrated here throughout the town in Smithfield. He knows he has to fight. He sends word back to Robert E. Lee that he's going to fight at a place near Bennetville. I did it.
Oh yeah, I love that. For those that didn't catch that at the end, that's basically me making a big mistake there on one of my clips for a video, and you know, I'm bringing on fellow YouTubers, YouTube creators here to kind of talk about what it is that they do on a regular basis, and part of it obviously is making the mistakes and having to correct yourself. So I always have to laugh at myself. Today we got Paul Woodadge on our channel here from World War II TV. Hey Paul, welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. Yeah, I've been trying to get you on here because, you know, my channel is primarily Civil War content, and I definitely wanted to speak to you since you're in a different niche. You're warfare, but you're World War II, which is extremely important. And as you know, here in the United States, we have some World War II content that we can cover, but it's mostly prisoner of war camps and things like that. So it's definitely great to get you on here today. So over there, so it's 7 p.m. over there where you're at right now, correct?
Yep, 7 p.m. here in Normandy. Yeah. It's we're getting to that time of year where it's long days. It doesn't get dark till kind of 11 p.m. So we've got plenty of daylight to go. Weather's good. So yeah, good time of year.
That's great. Excellent. So what exactly inspired you to start this channel in the first place?
Well, like all good ideas, it was random and accidental, basically. So I've been living in Normandy for 24 years. I worked for the majority of the first 3/4 of that as a battlefield guide, so taking people around the beaches and the battlegrounds and the airborne drop zones. And in 2018, I kind of realized I was repeating myself a lot, and the excitement of doing it at the beginning was starting to wane a little bit. And I had this idea of kind of making documentaries, doing the kind of thing you do and JD does and all these other people do. And because I was a bit fed up with conventional TV. It was all a little bit dumbed down, and they weren't covering a thing. So I started making things, going out with cameras and making stuff, and then rapidly realized I absolutely hated the editing process. I mean, just to the point where I would scream at everything, including myself. And it would take me hours and hours and hours to get a 15-minute thing ready. And so I was like, oops, I've sort of invested in this idea that I'm now not sure is any better than what I've been doing. Yeah. And then COVID came around.
Okay.
And during COVID, it was like, okay, so can't go places, restricted in my house, can't do touring because there's no customers, you can't go anywhere. How can I somehow, keep going, doing something that has a connection with what both things I've been recently doing? So I hit upon the idea of live streaming. And so everything I do, bar occasionally when someone can't do something live, everything I do on World War II TV is live. And which means I don't have to do any editing. It means the minute like this, when I press, like you will press at some point later, the end stream button, that's it. It stands and falls on whatever was said during that content. If I make a mistake, if I don't make a mistake, if I find my sentences flow out of my head very well, like they do sometimes, other days they don't, it all just stands and falls. And it's all about having the guests on to then talk about the history. So, 5 years down the line, 1,700 live shows or something like that. I haven't actually counted them on the channel. It seems like it was sort of a process that had a plan at the beginning, but it really didn't. It was sort of an accidental solution to a temporary situation. And that's what it is. So I have historians come on, I host, and we talk about their book or their project or their research. I have theme weeks where we've been tackling, for example, the liberation of the concentration camps and the crossing of the Rhine, so things 80 years ago, but also kind of more broad themes like, we'll have an infantry week or a tank destroyers week or whatever. So that's really what I do. But yeah, people say, "Oh, you planned it very well." So no, I didn't plan anything. I don't think many of my YouTube colleagues really sort of started out with like pie charts and and plans. It's all just something that kind of evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. And what it is pretty excellent, actually. Just to give you your props there, it's an excellent channel. You talked about speaking to historians and stuff. I mean, you speaking to historians and vets and all that good stuff. Is there any story that you've gotten from them or gained from them that stands out as something that's especially powerful to you?
I mean, so many, and not just reminiscences about the war from veterans, but sort of general kind of life advice and just little nuggets of things that stick away in my head. I'll give you 2 examples, and I hate to do the kind of name dropping of veterans, but this is a Wild Bill Garnier story for me, Company 506, one of the Band of Brothers, and we were talking about the Battle of Bloody Gulch. So June the 13th in Carenton, when the German 17th SS and Fallschirmjäger counterattacked towards Carenton, and I was politely trying to explain to him how F Company, who in the series are the bad guys because they let everybody down, which, spoiler alert, they absolutely didn't. They knocked out 2 or 3 Stugs and armored vehicles. They held the line. They allowed other units to stabilize. But I'd had experience in the past of sort of, if you tell a veteran, it's careful. You have to be careful how you tell a veteran that maybe the bit of action they were in on a particular day wasn't the hotspot. Maybe there was another bit a little bit down the road that was a little bit tougher, because you don't want to come across as like belittling their contribution.
Right.
So I was trying to politely say, what you were doing was really important, but let me tell you about F Company. And he knew a few guys at F Company.
Yeah.
And Bill could be coarse and rude and disgusting, and most of my Bill Garnier stories are too blue for YouTube. But I was telling him this story, and he looked at me, and he had this way. Sometimes when he would talk to you, he would grip your hand and like kind of really like vice like.
Yeah.
And he said, Paul, or Woody, most people call me Woody. He said, every soldier thinks they're in the muddiest foxhole with the most shells exploding overhead, with the most armored vehicles bearing down on them, with who've had the worst drill instructor, the worst this. He said, that's the life of a soldier. He said, it's down to the historians to actually rank the experiences on particular days. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's really open-minded. It's profound. I'm sitting talking to a guy who actually was there. I was never there. I was never in combat. I never saw these things. And he was respecting, if you like, the trade of a historian. So that was a really important moment that kind of sticks in my mind.
That's amazing.
And another one that always kind of moves me is, and it just, I happened to be at a party last night and a few Band of Brothers stories came into my head. This was with a group of the actors from the TV show. And we were talking about individual acts of bravery. They'd been out that day to Omaha Beach, and they had heard the story of Jimmy Monteith, L Company 16th Infantry, Medal of Honor recipient for D-Day, for absolutely kicking ass and getting up the beach, the F1 jaw. And we were talking about how in history, people are judged harshly or brilliantly by short moments in their career. You think of the Audie Murphys and things like that. And sometimes, like anybody else, you have a good day at the office, so to speak, and some days you have a bad day at the office. But if you, as a military leader, a commander, an NCO, whatever, if you have a bad day, history might judge you for that for the rest of your life. I'm thinking Custer, Little Bighorn, kind of is a good example of that kind of thing, And it can mean that your entire career forevermore is judged on the one day it all went tits up, we say in English, And I thought at the end of my career, as all the things I've done, battlefield guiding and YouTubing and doing other stuff and bits, I would absolutely not want to be judged for the worst days of my life. I'd like to be judged for the collective experience, because some days I just don't feel I'm doing my best on World War II TV. My words don't come out. I tours where it didn't sing, and I would like to be judged for the overall performance. And I think those kind of things are the kind of things I've met by talking to people from different areas. It's all kind of pushed towards me being, I hope, a better historian. So to give people a fair crack of the whip and not be too judgmental. And if you think a commander was not very good on a particular day, why was he not very good that day? Was he worried about his wife? Was he worried about his children? Was he ill? I mean, those kind of things. And I think those are the events that stick with me now, the moment, the encounters, because they've been part of my learning as a human being.
Absolutely. Well, and I like to think of it like this too. I mean, the vast majority of the people that are out there, I don't think we all have a ton of great days. I think we have a lot more of those days where we are just not getting it right, or we are trying hard to get it right. And, it is a shame that sometimes people are judged just by that one crap moment, It's like they used to say too, you could have 100 attaboys, but all it takes is that one crap and it's over with. Everybody starts to think about you in a negative way. So, what episode or interview can you think of that makes the biggest impact on you personally in your life that you've had?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's the ones that are inspirational about what human beings can deal with in adversity. Those stories of courage. And one of the things that has been an absolute bonus of my channel is that viewers have come through to being guests. In fact, there's a couple in the audience today, people like Scott Grimwood, Rick Green, Susan Yu, I think they're all in the audience, who then come on and share their father's story or a story that's personal to them. And that as you study history, you kind of have to look at it in a very global way. Studying something like the Eastern Front, I mean, an army front is tens of thousands of personnel. Holocaust is 11 million people killed. It's so hard to dig into that and actually understand what that means, because the numbers are just so high. But when you hear about one person's struggle, one person battling against the awful circumstances brought about by war, I think those are the ones that bring it home for me. So we had one not that long ago, Finding Ruth. So it's about a historian who was looking into her relative, who was one of the Germans who was basically taken away. Well, she was in a home for people, with mental health issues, but eventually gets euthanized by the Nazis as part of their and so it was an interesting look at that terrible program the Nazis instigated, but it made it all the more personal because this woman is talking about her own flesh and blood relative that she never met. So those are the ones where, even if I'm having to do the thing like you're doing of putting the comments up and monitoring what's going on, I'm being profoundly changed as a human being by it. And you realize that your own troubles in life can often be dwarfed by the massive tribulations people have had to go through in history. I mean, you said at the beginning, primarily Civil War student of that, and again, it's very easy to get interested in the battle maneuvers and who won this and which general that, but there's also those terrible levels of human suffering at the bottom end, where victims haven't necessarily chosen the side. Victims are just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and war descends on them. So those are the ones that I think really stick with me, where you're getting a lens on a bigger story via an individual.
Right. And I've talked to lots of people about about their ancestors and things like that over the course of the few years that I've been dealing with history. And a lot of people, they tend to have a very personal connection to their ancestry, and it's almost as if they can feel the suffering that they're going through when they talk about them. But I bring it back to, well, if you think you can feel the suffering, imagine being the person that had to go through the experience. It's pretty profound when you read some of these letters that these men wrote back home coming from these battlefields. So here in the U.S., we got Gettysburg. That's kind of like the magnet of everything militaria. You know, all these people from all over the world come here to see Gettysburg. They travel to this place, and even Americans.
Even I've been there.
Even you've been there. And, you know, we all go to this place again and again and again. It's one of those places where everybody seems to come together and reflect on things. Is there a place over there where you're at right now that's kind of like that?
Well, I mean, the whole of Normandy, really. But, you know, it's the beaches. It's for Brits, it's probably Pegasus Bridge. Americans, obviously, Omaha Beach and the American Cemetery above it.
Yeah.
You know, but out elsewhere in France, for the French, Oradour-sur-Glane, where the SS raised the entire village. So Normandy is the mecca for World War II battlefield studies. I mean, we get something like 4 million people come to Normandy as tourists a year. About 2 million of them do the American Cemetery and the D-Day site. So World War II visitors to Normandy, it dwarfs what goes to the Battle of the Bulge or Anzio or Stalingrad, all these other places there, partly because of ease of access, but also because of Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers and as with Gettysburg, if you meet someone on the street and you ask them to name a Civil War battle, they'll say Gettysburg, and if you ask them about World War II, they'll say D-Day. A lot of them. I mean, maybe Pearl Harbor will come up, maybe Midway, but you know, D-Day is right up there. So people come in their thousands on a pilgrimage, often not really necessarily with a personal connection. That was how it used to be back in the day. Even when I started guiding, it was people tracing their grandfathers, their grandmothers, and that still happens. But now it's more of a collective almost responsibility as a Brit or an American or an Australian to come and just pass through this area where, I mean, eventually about 2 million Allied soldiers came through Normandy. So you're feeling you're going through those footsteps. So it is the whole of Normandy is an open air museum in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, and with all of these open air museums that we have, and people studying warfare like they do, why do you think that it just kind of almost seems like the world doesn't get it? Like we are repeating these same mistakes over and over and over again.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean that is an unfortunate aspect of what we do, isn't it? Is that, you know, history is there to guide us, and yet it seems so few people who are in control of the world seem to have a good grasp on history. I don't know that I go with the history repeating itself. There are echoes. You see similarities. You know, I don't think we as humankind have completely ever repeated ourselves, like literally got into the same battlefield and done exactly the same thing again. But there are these echoes, and yeah, you know, I this is where YouTube comes in, because one of the things we kind of rebel against is this idea that, well, they don't teach it in the schools anymore. Now, that may or may not be the case. It depends where you are in the world. Some countries, some states, some regions are teaching lots of history and others aren't. But I don't know. I don't think I know any historians who are absolutely inspired to get on the route to share history at school.
Yeah.
It happens elsewhere. It happened on a trip with their parents to somewhere. It happened because of movies. It happened because of reading a particular book or a comic book or a set of stamps coming out or witnessing an anniversary. So I think that we can only expect people to use platforms like YouTube and books and comics moving forward to get their history. I may be controversial. I don't know that it really matters if it's not being taught in the school, because how much of the, as I would say, maths, you would say math, how much of that do you use on a practical daily basis? I mean, that, you know, how much of that, you know, we have my teachers would say to me, don't forget, young men, young boys, you won't have a calculator in your pocket every day of your life. Well, we have. So, so how much of the schooling do we really take forward? I don't, I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't go to school, folks. I'm not, you know, but I'm saying that I don't think a lack of education about the past
Yeah.
at school is necessarily the problem. I think it's about familiarizing ourselves with it generally, and that's where I'm an advocate for the video games. And so I feel it's a to paraphrase Eisenhower in World War II, who went forward on a broad front strategy. I think that's how education should be. It's a broad front. It's you use your video games, use your movies and TV series and YouTube and TikTok and podcasts and every, whatever it is. Even, I don't know, the back of when I was a kid, the back of the cereal boxes had little bits of history on it, because you'd get little collectible, knights in shining armor in them. So you'd learn a little bit of history even while you're eating your cornflakes. So I think that's, that's an important thing. I don't know why the world is repeating the mistakes of the past, but we have the tools now to not, if we want to, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, that's for sure. And I really think I think school's kind of the starting point or the inspiration, like you were talking about. That's really what gets us out there and gets us inspired to do it. And me, quite personally, I wouldn't want my child learning everything about history from school, because it's taught by a human being, and they do not get a difference of opinions from other people. That's where YouTube comes in. You can explore. Plus, that's where stacks and stacks of books come in. You get into that information for yourself, and you discern the truth. So.
Well, I mean, in a way, to bounce off what you said, is that schools should be teaching critical thinking.
Yes.
Rather than actually providing information, teach people how to assimilate information, how to use sources, how to say, okay, I want to study this. I want to look at whatever it would be, airborne viruses, which was, of course, the thing we were talking about 3 or 4 years ago, or history, or whatever it would be. What are my tools to find out accurate information about that? So, I think that's where maybe education is failing a bit, because when people look at something like YouTube now, how do you know what's accurate? How do you know what's real? How do you know what's even, I had someone on a live stream a few weeks ago who didn't seem to be convinced it was actually live, even though I was responding in real time to comments coming in. But they may have just been joking, but I think they were serious. They were wondering whether or not I was an AI generated, robot. It was like, well, if all you can come up with is something looking like me, I'd get back to that, get back to your software and improve it a bit. What we need is a hat. We need to give this AI thing a hat to give it gravitas. And but teaching how to know what's real and how to not just take the first thing you read. I mean, as a Normandy tour guide, one of the interesting things is that I'm one of the old guys now. I was one of the young people when I moved it, but now I'm one of the old veteran, gray bearded guys. And you see people going on this like journey when they become a tour guide, because some of our friends here, they're in their 20s. I've got pairs of socks older than they are, and they get by their second year of guiding. And the first year starts off really bad, because there's, you're presenting D-Day to someone. You think, are my facts right? And then you get the kind of confidence as you start knowing your stories. And there's a particular thing that happens, is that where the guide, at the end of the first season, they started their first season having read, let's say, 3 or 4 books. They read Joe Balkovsky's book on Omaha Beach, and I don't know, James Holland's Normandy 44 or something like that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the first season, they think, well, I'll read a few more books now for next season to build on my knowledge. But the books they read in the second round question the facts given in the first set of books, because they have a different interpretation of things. And then they'll say, so which one's right then? I said, this is the you're now at the, not that I've ever run a marathon, you're now at like the 20-mile point of the marathon. What you've got to do now is push through. You have to read more books.
That's it.
And then at some point, your own logic will start cutting in and going, okay, so I've read 6 books now on this particular subject. 5 seem to be broadly in the same area, and that other one there seems to be completely way off. So perhaps that one that's way off is not a good source, and the other 5 are. And that's the kind of process of going through that confidence. And I don't know that we're teaching those skills of how to read different books and then and be good at assessing information, because not all books are good. Some are better than others.
Yeah, that's a fact. I mean, and it really, I mean, it all comes down to what you like too. I mean, people pick up books, they'll get into it first 15 minutes, and it's like, okay, this is just not for me. We were talking earlier before we went live about some of the challenges of running a YouTube channel. What's some of the stuff you've run into over the course of the last couple of years?
Well, none of us know how it works. I mean, in basic terms, we know how to, stream to the platform. We know what the rules are, and YouTube sends us these updates of new policies and things like that. But the simple thing is, what works for one channel doesn't work for another channel, and the rules don't always seem to be applied in the same way to different channels. Like, we don't know whether it's based on where your business is registered, whether you're monetized, not the number of views you get. I don't know. So that just sort of understanding how it works is, well, there is no understanding how it works. It's a dark art. It's like, I'd rather try to understand, cats. Cats make more sense than YouTube. But the challenges is that you've got to sort of, you start off randomly. As I said, I didn't plan my channel. It just sort of came about. Is at some point you've got to decide what's your audience, who's your audience, what are you trying to do, and essentially, like with writing books, the more detail you go, the smaller the audience, sort of, and I'm sure people go to, where you are in Virginia, near all those battlefields there, people go into the souvenir shops of somewhere like Gettysburg or Antietam, whatever it would be, and there's like an 800-page book, and there's a 50-page kind of locally made but accurate, but some more people will buy the 50-page book than will buy the 800-page book. Because of money, because of time, because of, oh my God, 800 pages. So, you kind of had to accept, okay, on my channel, we're talking for an hour and a half on a subject that's pretty niche. So we're not going to get the millions of views, because the millions of people will be wanting their information in a slightly more compact version.
That's a fact.
So, maybe the first couple of years, some people I knew would say, oh, you're going to hit this. It's steadily climbing, and you're going to hit this ramp where it goes up. And I think that happened to JD at History Underground. It definitely happened to Rob of History Explorer in the UK.
Yeah.
I've yet to, it's never gone backwards. It's always going up, but it's still on a nice gentle incline. So, but it doesn't matter. What matters is, are the people who are watching it getting something out of it, and have you built a community? And that the challenges of working with a platform that doesn't seem to make sense. If you're running a restaurant, a good steak is a good steak, and a bad steak isn't, and I think, with a restaurant, not that I've ever run a restaurant, but my French family have had restaurant background, is that, good quality ingredients, cook things well, good service should kind of guarantee you a successful restaurant. But there are some people doing incredibly good content who don't get the views. And there are people doing absolute rubbish that are getting crazy views. So
it's definitely a challenging thing, but every time I get that feeling of a little bit of a discouragement about it, and I start to think back on that very first day when I saw somebody subscribe, and I said, wait a minute, somebody actually wants to watch me? This is crazy. And then I started putting the content out there, and then it became less of somebody wants to watch me and more of, I've got to get this right. Like, the stuff that these people are consuming needs to be something that's extremely valuable, and it covers history 100%, because there's so many different stories and perspectives that are out there in history that just aren't covered. Places that I've run into here in Virginia locally that, the history books barely brush the history, and you go to them and you're like, wow, I can't believe no one's ever talked about this. And then you just put it out there, and hopefully people watch it. And if they don't, they don't. But I'm pretty happy with it myself. And you're right. There are a lot of challenges when it comes to creating a channel that are
and you've got to earn a thick skin. I was watching one of my kind of random things I watch when I have free time is I love those Gordon Ramsay kitchen nightmares kind of things. I don't know why I like it, because I'm not really a foodie, but I kind of like him, I suppose. And I was watching a thing where he was saying, to be a chef, you've got to have an incredibly thick skin. You've got to, and when you're helping other chefs, who are training, you've got you when you're criticizing their food, you're criticizing their food, not them as a person. And so
Yeah.
you have to learn in YouTube that sometimes when they're being critical of you personally, which we all get the occasional, I don't like your hat. Yeah. I had someone said, I'm literally like this. They said, you're too short. And I go, how can you even tell I'm too short? Anyway. But you just kind of learn that you can't please everybody all the time. And some people just will take a dislike to your face and try not to take it personally. And they won't like the way you speak. They won't like the way you do it. And as JD on History Underground has, that you get accused of being too left, too right, too much detail, not enough detail. Your shows are paradoxically too long and too short at the same time. And you kind of go, I can't keep all these plates spinning. What do you want from me? So you kind of got to eventually just kind of think, okay, you don't quite know who your audience are, although you know the ones you interact with, and just do what makes you happy. Yeah. Does it feel right for you? And accept the fact that it won't appeal to everybody.
Yeah, no, that's a fact. Yeah. Now, I kind of stay out of the comments. I answer the ones.
I can't stay out.
Yeah.
I tell myself, don't go in, and I just go in.
Yeah. So, is there a part of World War II history that you think is extremely underappreciated and not covered enough?
Yes. Wherever you're from, you know too much about your country's involvement and not enough about the others.
Yep.
Basically, we're all blinkered in a positive way, sort of, but we learn our history from through a national lens. And I think to really understand things, you've got to walk in someone else's shoes for a mile, so to speak. And I think so. For example, the Sino-Japanese War. Incredibly important if you live in China, Japan, Thailand, Taiwan, all those places around there. But we Americans and Brits kind of dismiss that. It's not really, it's just Stilwell. It's flying tigers, but it's not really, it's not where the stuff was happening. And you go, no, when it was where the stuff was happening. So,
yeah,
so we're all a bit guilty of viewing things through that national lens. I mean, one of the things I often, I will pick up on is as a D-Day resident guide, is that map of the 5 landing beaches where it has the American flag over Utah and Omaha, the Canadian flag over Juneau, the British flag over Golden Sword. You go, okay, that's a nice little kind of aid memoir to the basic delineation of those beaches. But there are Brits on Utah, there are Americans on Gold, there are Brits on Juneau, there are French on Sword, there are Poles on Gold later, all that kind of thing. And I think, separating it all and say, well, I only want to learn American history because I'm American. I only want to learn British because I'm British. I mean, and even the language we use. I mean, I grew up understanding the 1940 period as the phony war, that bit after the war was declared and nothing happened till kind of April, May 1940. Well, nothing happened if you're a Brit, although the RAF are doing an offensive bombing campaign against Germany, blah, blah, blah. But a hell of a lot happened if you're in Poland.
Oh, yeah.
A hell of a lot happened if you're in China.
Yeah.
So I've even had Americans back in the day. I was with I'm not a pop at Americans, it's a particular family, and the dad had sort of taken me. I was much younger then, and he was older than me, and he kind of took me aside and said, "I need you to present this history accurately." And he kind of took a negative judge to me or something. He says, "I'll be watching you to make sure you're getting. I know this stuff." All right. And I started off a little presentation to his kids like 11 and 10 or something, and I said, so the war 1939 to 45, and he stopped me. He said, the war began on December the 7th, 1941. Everyone knows that. And I'm like, whoa, yes, from a certain point of view it did, but globally speaking, it didn't. And that, I think, is a very good example of the way people sometimes have learned their history.
Yeah.
In that neat box of national identity. And so wherever you are, I can guarantee you focus too much on what your country did. And I include myself. I'm including myself in that group, although I like to think I broadened out my interests over the years.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. One thing to open up my eyes to that was I took a trip. I was deploying overseas, and I ended up in Canada before I went across the pond. And in Canada, there was a sign, a historical sign that talked about a portion of the war, Revolutionary War.
Right.
And if you read that sign and you're from Canada, the evil colonists were coming to attack Canada, and the Canadians saved Canada from the evil colonists that were
Right.
coming to attack Canada. And I was like, wow, that is, I never thought of it from that perspective.
Yeah.
I think of it from an American's
Yeah.
perspective, pride on the American Revolution. We're revolting against an evil government. But if you're looking at it from the other side, these people that are living in a colony that's owned by the British government, they're attacking the thing that they know.
Yeah.
And to be able to see that from that perspective, really, it opens you up to a whole new avenue of history, and you start to think, well, you know what, maybe I should start reading a little bit more
Yeah,
and getting a little bit more involved.
you have to go through a process of telling yourself that some of the things you've learnt are not wrong, but you've got to get yourself out of that trench that you're plowing this particular furrow. I mean, I was at a party, a French friend's birthday party last night, and we were talking about the reporting of the Russian Revolution. So the way as Brits it was reported in Britain was basically hairy anarchists kill our royal family's cousin is kind of how it was angled. And that's not incorrect, that version, in some ways. But the other way of reporting it is group of rebels overthrow a despotic regime that had been cruel over generations, right?
Right.
And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, really. But that was how it was painted to us, because Queen Victoria, the families were all linked up, the Tsar and the Queen Victoria, like George V and Kaiser Wilhelm a generation later, all related. And I think it was Kennedy. Kennedy said one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. I mean, it's all about perceptions. It's all about that. How has it been presented to you? And if your homeland is invaded by someone, they are the enemy, even if they are part of a process that globally are considered to be doing something on the side of the right. It's about learning humility. It's about learning humility and understanding that your own versions of things is a version that may not apply elsewhere. And it's like the bad traveler, the bad traveler from Brit who goes over and stands in the south of France and says, "Hello, can I have a sausage, please?" And does that. Or the American who expects things to be like they are in New York and Paris. No, you're in Paris now. It runs differently. That.
Yeah.
But to understand history, you've got to kind of take off your patriotic shirt a little bit at times and kind of go, okay, how do other people view what my country did? How do other people view this? And it doesn't necessarily change your mind. It just allows you to be open-minded.
Yeah, for sure. So to kind of change the topic a little bit, but staying on history, excuse me. There's a show over there, the BBC, that I like. I liked for a long time, and it does a very good job at teaching history to children. It's called Horrible Histories.
Oh yes, yeah.
Have you? Is that something that you're kind of into, or is there other aspects or something that you can recommend out there that people over here might be able to check out that's similar to that?
I mean, I agree. Horrible Histories is good, and I know one of the guys from that who was the guy who was the major in Ghosts. I forget his name now. But he's good friends with James Holland and Al Murray. Does a lot of things with them, and so. Yeah, Horrible Histories is incredibly important. And the writers of that were solid on their history. I remember one of the ones, a sketch where there was a song about the RAF in the Battle of Britain that was, it was like an actual textbook put into a funny song. And I can try to think of something else on top of my head that would be similar to that, but I can't think of one. But then even things like like Peaky Blinders, and my other half likes Downton Abbey and The Crown and things like that. Even those things, they do, even through a fictitious lens, they throw a bit of light on some of these eras of the past and things like that. So that you can kind of tell when those things were made by the because they're set in the past, but they're they're sort of echoing what's going on right now. Is that a lot of the late 1960s, 1970s war movies set in World War II were really about Vietnam, weren't they? They were, Patton was kind of about Vietnam. MASH, set in Korea, was really about Vietnam, and so. But off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else. But Horrible Histories is really good. And it's interesting. I've gone off onto a tangent, but one of the things I found out is that a lot of people who I would consider, comedians growing up are the same age as me, and they have interest in World War II because it was their they grew up like I did, playing with Sherman tanks models and kits and things like that. So, for those who are watching this from Britain, people like Harry Enfield, comedians, and Charlie Higson from The Fast Show, all these kind of people. I mean, even pop stars, Gary Newman of True Army back in the 80s had a Harvard T6 trainer painted up as a Zero back in the day. Midge Ure from Ultravox and Live Aid had a Jeep and was a World War II buff. So even people in that kind of mainstream media had an interest in World War II because when they were kids, it was, everyone knew a veteran, everyone knew what it was. So it's amazing how much of that stuff had kind of filtered through our culture. I mean, it may not have made it your side of the pond, but we're talking 20, 30 years ago now, one of the British beer companies, Spitfire Ale, had a whole series of adverts that were like Battle of Britain jokes. Okay. And so one of them was Spitfire Ale downed everywhere over Kent, just like the Luftwaffe in 1940. And you can look them up, folks. Look up these Spitfire Battle of Britain adverts, and culturally, they meant so much. There was another one where we know in Britain, we grow up with incredible reverence for the Dam Busters mission, the bouncing bombs, the Avro Lancasters. And there's an advert, I think it was for another beer, might have been Carlsberg, I can't remember. Someone will correct me in the sidebar, where it's black, it starts black and white, and there's a German like patrolling the top of a dam. And it's amber, and the bombs start bouncing down towards him, and he starts doing these spectacular goalkeeper dives where he's pushing the bombs over the back of the dam so they don't go off. Yeah, and then the punchline is, he had Carlsberg, that's what made him do it, or something like that. Carling Black Label, Nicky Robertson just said there. So there we go. So there's a whole generation of people who will get that humor because it's just deeply inside our psyche, that we grew up with The Great Escape and Escaping. So if me and my friends from Ireland, David and Stephanie, we were in a terrible hotel in Zargan in Poland last year. We were going off to see Stalag Luft 3 the very next day. Yeah. So we're going to it was a horrible hotel. We were going to the breakfast in the morning, doing the miming the spreading out the dirt from the tunnel in our trousers from The Great Escape. And the joke was, we were trying to burrow out of our hotel rooms. It was so bad. And there's a whole generation who just get that stuff. So it goes back what I was saying about education, like 3 or 4 generations of people in Britain since the war just grew up knowing about World War II because it was what we laughed at. The references were there. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty amazing stuff. Well, coming closer to the end here, I wanted to ask a more personal question. Throughout your life, everybody, they have these people that inspire them to do what they do or keep them going or back them up and they look towards them for strength. Do you have somebody in your life that's been like that for you? Someone that is that strength, that rock, that foundation? I mean, my granddad, who died 25 plus years ago, was a really important figure in my life. My mum passed away last month, so she was a big figure, just the relatives I knew. My scout leaders when I was a kid were World War II veterans, so I seemed to be. I didn't know it, but I was surrounded by good figures of good influence growing up. Yeah. But I don't know quite where I've got my kind of moral compass from. But I know hanging around veterans a lot definitely steered me. how to deal with adversity, how to enjoy life when you get back as well. That kind of making do, that finding a way of making things work, that kind of like the Baston veterans when they get to a cold winter saying, well, not as cold as Baston, that kind of thing. And, well, this meal isn't as bad as what we had in Stalag 3, that kind of thing. So I think I've had that general understanding of, being positive and grateful for the era I grew up in. And I did kind of, when obviously the situation in Ukraine still going on, but there was that thing where they were saying that they were getting so desperate they were thinking of calling up people into their 50s, and not that I am Ukrainian would ever be called up, and I remember the cutoff being, I think they said up to 54 in Ukraine or something. And I thought to myself, I'm 56 now. I was kind of grateful that I'm assuming that no matter what happens to the British government, they won't need me anymore. I mean, if the situation is so bad, they need a middle-aged historian to go over there and save the day. I think we've already screwed, basically. So that being grateful that I've got to a certain age, because I didn't have to go and fight in a war. I can just talk about it and earn money talking about it. So that's an interesting thing that I kind of don't know where I kind of got all that from, but it would be a lie to say I don't have pangs of moral, about what I do for a living. And all of us that make money out of history, you're making money off the backs of the dead. I mean, I don't see it that way, but I'm glad I have that introspective way of looking at things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely don't see it that way. I mean, those people, if they had a choice, obviously they would be alive with their families, but their second choice would probably to have their stories be told. And and I think that's what we're all trying to do, is tell their stories. So
absolutely.
Well, Woody, here at the end, open floor. What do you got going on? Anything coming up that you want to talk or tell the people about?
But I'm always doing things. I mean, I'm speaking at a Peace in Europe conference in London next Saturday, organised by Edmund O'Sullivan, who does a lot of work about the Irish 38th Brigade in World War II. So I'm speaking alongside people I know, like Jenny Grant and Gavin Mortimer and others, about World War II. I've got more content coming on the channel. I'm got to get back into the mindset for writing my next book about the Battle of La Haye de Puy in Normandy, American 8th Corps, pushing down that way. But just keeping busy, just keeping myself. I like to have lots of things going on at the same time, and just keep on doing it while I can and while I enjoy it. I think is what I've got coming up.
That's it. Well, that's what life is all about, right? Getting out there, doing what you love, and doing it while you can. So, well, everybody, this concludes the live stream here today. Woody, I really appreciate you coming on today and talking with us and giving us your insight and bringing that extra voice here to the channel.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. As you notice, I do like talking. Yeah.
That's very good. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I couldn't think of a better place to end this video than right here in the middle of the woods, the Battle of the Wilderness, at the hotly contested Brocken Plank Road, Orange Plank Road. Not too far in that direction, Longstreet's wounded. Right here where I'm at right now is a place where men like Wadsworth and Hayes end up losing their lives. Families lose loved ones. Soldiers burned to death in these fields around me here. If you'll let these fields do it, they'll touch your soul.